she made a valid point, and some of the committee members also, that we also want to try and get the committee members more involved, seeing what is done. And one of the exciting apps that we've launched, you probably saw it online in the media, and also the Premier mentioned it, is the Swims app. And Chairperson, we will be extending a formal invitation to you and the committee so that if you can find space in your diaries to maybe visit one of our offices and see in practice how the app works, and engage directly with our officials and see the massive impact it can make for social workers and the impact in the Western Cape. And that will also allow us to be advocates that this gets rolled out elsewhere in the country. There's also some very exciting other projects that we are going to launch. And I do want to make an effort that we extend the invitation to committee members, because you will have to hold me and the department accountable for the work we do. But we also need to give you an opportunity to see firsthand how some of these projects that we roll out work. So from my side, thank you for this opportunity, and I am looking forward to working with each and everybody during this term. And then also to the department, thank you for holding the fort today. It was a steep learning curve coming in, but I am excited that we have very competent officials that will serve the residents of this province well, as they have done. So, Chairperson, from my side, that's all for now. And I will, if you would allow me, I will stay online until my engagement starts, and then I will have to log off.
Thank you very much, Minister Lund. And I believe I can speak for the committee as such. Thank you so much for your approach. And I think it's also very commendable from the onset that you have indicated how you want to include this committee in the work of the department, and also take us step by step and include us in the various engagements. So thank you very much for that. We sincerely do appreciate that, and all the best also with your engagements today and going forward. We really do look forward in engaging with you on the works of the Department of Social Development. Just for the record, I believe we do have a guest in the gallery. You can kindly introduce yourself, sir. Can you just come close to a mic, please, for the record?
Good morning, committee members. My name is Anton van Zyl, and I'm a researcher for one of the political parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. van Zyl, and your presence are noted, and you are most welcome in this committee meeting. Honourable members, this briefing has been scheduled to familiarise the new members of the Standing Committee on Social Development in the 7th Provincial Parliament with the Department of Social Development. The department has been invited to come and brief the committee on the department's annual performance plan for the 2024-25 financial year. And the department has been requested that the presentation should cover the organizational structure, the mission, the vision, the core functions, the key programs and legislation in the pipeline. In addition, the presentation should address the budget and any other challenges. Honourable members, at this stage of our meeting, I will now hand over to the Department of Social Development. And Dr. McDonald, you can kindly go ahead or indicate to us who will be leading the presentation. Colleagues, perhaps just as a quickie maintenance, we will allow the department to complete the presentation. Please do make your notes. Also make notes of which slide you refer to. If there's any amendments to the presentation that we have received yesterday, I'm sure the department will indicate as such for us to take note and amend our notes accordingly as well. Thank you very much, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. We are going to present jointly between Mr. Miller and Ms. Niftachadien. I don't think there has been any amendments, colleagues, as far as the order of the slides may have changed slightly. So we just have to note that. But I'll hand over to my colleagues to do the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You may continue.
Thank you, HOD, and good morning again, Chair and members. The slides that you have in your handout are identical to the slides that we will be presenting. However, we did change the order. The budget slides we've moved up from one section to under each of the programs. It just makes the flow and for the logic, it's a bit more organized. Okay. So I'll start and then I'll hand over to Siam later. Just the overview. Start first with we are as a department, our vision, mission, our policy informants. Oh, not very clear. Our organizational structure, looking at our service delivery areas. And we'll round off looking at the budgetary and human resources and risks and challenges that we have. So first, looking at our situation, we find ourselves in as a department where we need to deliver services. And this slide will just show you the population distribution. It also gives you a comparison between 2011 and 2022, because a lot is changing, and we as a department need to change accordingly. We need to react to the environment. And you'll see the bulk of the population is in the metro. About 2/3 of the population are based in the metro, with about 1/3 outside of the metro. The biggest area being the Winelands Overberg area. If we look at the population structure, on the left-hand side, you'll have the 2011 population structure, and on the right-hand side, we have the 22 population structure. You can see that there's a shift. If you look at the age, the working population age groups, you see there's a huge growth there. You'll see also at the top of the pyramid, the right-hand side has got bigger bars. We have aging of our population as well. So in terms of service delivery, those are things that we need to note in our service delivery planning. Just to highlight some of the particular issues that we need to look at, the growth of the population. We see, and I've given you 96 as a reference as well, that our population is almost doubled in size since 1996. We look at the proportion of children. We see that as a proportion of the total population, it's declining. In absolute numbers, it's still growing, though. The working age population as a proportion is growing. But the biggest change we see is in the proportion of persons 65 years and older, the older population. There we see the biggest increase. The dependency ratio is coming down. That's because we see the growth of the working population. The other important thing to note is that we see that the average household size is been declining steadily over time, and more and more of our households are living in formal dwellings. This slide just highlights some of the socioeconomic challenges that we have. We know that unemployment is still a huge problem in our department. In our province, sorry. We know that many of our households do not have adequate access to food. And if we look at what it says in the General Household Survey, then we have about 17% of our children that live in households where they report that they run out of food in any particular month. We still have lots of structural inequality. We have overcrowding in many of the households still. Very disturbingly, we still have a large number of murders and crime in the province. Sexual offences are still very high and is increasing. We see also an increase in the drug-related crimes. And if we look at most of our services, we see there's an increase in the demand. Also, if I look at the socioeconomic challenges and particularly the vulnerability of our children and our families, look at some of the childcare protection data, we see the child abuse and neglect been quite an increase in the reporting. We see also that if we look at the types of neglect, we see that sexual abuse and deliberate neglect make up 2/3 of the numbers. We have a large number of families that are at risk. We look at the household and family structure. As I said, over time, there have been changes. One of the big changes, as I pointed out earlier, is the average household size, which has been decreasing. And that's also because we see less nuclear families, less extended families, which also has a change to the care patterns for our children. Family breakdown. If you look also at the data, you'll see that many of our children live in households where there are no employed adult in the household, where there's maybe only one parent, or even we see that we have a large percentage of children in the province that are in foster care. The numbers are in the presentation. So there's a large focus then on also the number of families that we need to look at participating in our family preservation and support services. Finding suitable parents for foster care is a challenge, and particularly if you see the large numbers, it increases the challenge. To go back then to our department and what is our vision and mission to deal with some of these things that I've highlighted. Well, our vision is a self-reliant society, and our mission is to ensure that we provide a comprehensive network of social development services that enables and empowers the poor, the vulnerable, and those that with special needs. The values, you all know the core values that we adhere to in the province: caring, competence, accountability, integrity, innovation, and responsiveness. There are many, many acts and policies that give us a constitutional and legislative mandate in order to operate. Just highlighted a few in the slide. If you have access to our annual performance plan, you'll see a more comprehensive list of the legislation and policies. So we have, for instance, the Children's Act, the Child Justice Act, the Probation Services Amendment Act, the Older Persons Act, Domestic Violence Act, the Criminal Law Amendment Act, Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, the Prevention of and Treatment of Substance Abuse Act, Mental Health Care Act, Disaster Management Act, Social Assistance Act, the Social Service Professions Act, the Public Finance Management Act, and the Public Procurement Act, which is a new one, which is also now come out. So as I said, these are just then a handful of the more important ones, but there is a lot more that you will find in our APP. What are then the core functions of our department? Two core functions. The one is the social welfare services, that is to the poor and vulnerable, in partnership with stakeholders and civil society organizations, focus being on children, older persons, persons with disabilities, and restorative services. Second core function is our community development service that provides sustainable development programs which facilitate empowerment of communities. Now we look at programs such as Sustainable Livelihoods Program, Poverty Alleviation, Youth Development, Social Relief, and institutional capacity building. What are some of the key priority policy informants? And this is what informed the current APP. Obviously, things will change, but the current APP that we are discussing today was informed by the National Development Plan 2020, the revised medium-term strategic framework for 2019 to 24, the Provincial Strategic Plan 2019 to 24, and the Western Cape Recovery Plan that came after that, our own departmental 5-year strategic plan, and then our APP annual performance plan, which we're presenting, which is now the final year of our 5-year strategic plan. Our organizational structure, and maybe you can zoom in. You have not helping much, but you have in the handouts, we have at the head of our organization, our new minister, Minister Lant, and his head of ministry is here present. We have Dr. MacDonald, who's our HOD. We have 6 chief directorates. The one represented by Siam and myself is for business planning and strategy. She heads up business planning and monitoring, and I head up the research and information management. Then we have our social welfare and restorative services. Ms. Goosen is here today. And then we also have the Chief Directorate for Children, Families and Vulnerable Groups, Mr. Jordan. And next to me is the Chief Director for Community and Partnership Development, Mr. Hewu. Not with us today, I think is Annemie van Reenen. She's the Chief Director responsible for our regions, for the service delivery, management and coordination. And then lastly, we have our financial management, our CFO, Mr. Juan Smith, and then these 2 directors, finance, Mr. Holly and Mr. Rakip for supply chain. That is the structure of our department. There are 1 or 2 vacancies at our management level. Most of them are in the process of being filled or are being covered by acting managers currently. Our service delivery areas, I touched briefly on in a previous slide. We have our head office, and then we have 6 regions. 3 of them in the metro. We have our Metro North region, Metro South, and Metro East, and a combined 21 service delivery areas in those 3 regions. We have 3 regions outside of the metro, the West Coast, the Winelands Overberg, and then the Eden Karoo, with a total of 24 service delivery areas in those 3 regions. So each of the regions has a director, as a corporate service section, and then we have our service delivery teams that provide the services that we as department provide. And then in partnership with the department, there's an excess of 1,000 NPOs that also provide services to the community. Yeah, I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Niftahuddin, who will take over from me from this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, through you. So in terms of how the department does what it does on a daily basis, we have 5 programs which follows the mandated National Treasury budget structure, which is the program structure we'll find in our APP. So it will be a little bit different from our organizational structure. There are 5 programs that we have. First of all, we have our administration program, social welfare services, children and families, restorative services, and our research and development program. Your administration, of course, is the way that strategic management and your support services at all levels of the department sits. Our social welfare services is about providing social welfare services to the poor and vulnerable in partnership with our key stakeholders in civil society. Our children and families program provide comprehensive child and family care and support services to the communities, whereas our restorative services will provide integrated developmental social crime prevention, anti-substance abuse services to the most vulnerable. And then lastly, our development and research program provides sustainable development programs which facilitate the empowerment of communities. And this is, of course, based on empirical research and demographic information. This is one of the slides that we've moved up from the budget section, just so that we can have a much better flow in terms of what budget underpins then those 5 programs. As you will see, our social welfare services is the bulk of the budget over the years, and that is followed by our restorative services and our children and families program. What we've also just provided is the indicative allocations that we've had for the department over the years, and then just for the committee to see how the indicative allocation has changed from what the actual allocation has been for the department. And you will notice from 2021-22 the decline between the indicative allocation and our actual departmental budgets that were provided to us, indicating that in essence we are dealing with a more and more constrained fiscal environment within the department as well. Looking at our economic classification, this is just the budget breakdown according to the different economic items. The bulk of our budget does go to compensation of employees. I'll focus here, for example, on the 24-25. This is the APP we're dealing with. And then our second largest budget item here would be your non-profit institutions. These are to the 1,000 plus NPOs that we fund to provide social welfare and community development services to communities. Okay. Then just also to note to the committee, you will see machinery and equipment does increase over the latter years of the MTEF, and this is related to the infrastructure works at our Siakatala Center, just for clarity on that. Looking at the sub-programs in particular, Program 1 consists of 3 sub-programs. We've got our Office of our MEC, our corporate management services, our head of department, as well as the finance and business planning and strategy falls under this particular sub-program. And then we have our district management program. And that program is where your corporate services of our regional offices, our 6 regional offices sit. Looking at how we measure ourselves in that particular program, we have 5 indicators which we have. In particular, we look at training interventions for our social workers, them being the individuals on the ground, on the front line who are providing those services. We also measure the number of bursaries we award, the number of social workers we have in our employ. And then from a governance perspective, we also focus on our payment of our suppliers within the 30-day requirement and the outcome of the annual audit as per the AGSA. And then just looking at your Program 1 budget, as it were, there you will note that the bulk of our budget sits under corporate management services. And as I've indicated, it's the 2 chief directorates as well as the HOD office that sits under that particular program. Looking at Program 2, under Program 2, we have 3 sub-programs. We have services to older persons, services to persons with disabilities, as well as our social relief sub-program. Just to note, under the social relief sub-program, this relates to the assessment of communities who need to be assessed for undue hardship or any kind of disaster not declared, as well as our sanitary dignity project also falls under the sub-program. In terms of how we measure ourselves, in terms of older persons, we look at the subsidies that we provide to older persons' homes, whether they are residential, independent, or assisted living, as well as the community-based care and support services out there. Under persons with disabilities, again, we provide subsidies for residential facilities for persons with disabilities. We also have our own residential facility, 1 in the province for persons with disabilities. And we also provide subsidies for protective workshops as well as community-based daycare centers for persons with disabilities. In terms of our social relief, as I've indicated, this is the assessment of community member citizens who unfortunately have been affected either by a disaster, undeclared, or have under certain conditions that have led to undue hardship for them. And then finally, we also measure ourselves in terms of the sanitary dignity project, how many of those hygiene products we've been able to provide. And this is just the sub-program budget for sub-program, or rather Program 2. Yeah. You will note, for example, the Program 2.1 of sub-program 2 is quite large. This is because all the social workers within our regional offices, the compensation of employees for those staff sits under sub-program 2.1. Okay, moving on to Program 3. Here we have 5 programs. You'll notice some of the program numbers are missing. This is because we have to follow the National Treasury budget structure, and so some budgets are not allocated to some programs. We have care and services to families, which focuses on functional families. We also have child care and protection, which focuses on the protection of the rights of the children within our province. We also have ECD and partial care, and then child and youth care centers and community-based services for children. Just for clarity, Chair, through you, the ECD function did move over to education a few years back. National Treasury has, however, not changed the naming convention, and so we still have to use ECD and partial care. In terms of how we measure ourselves as a department, for care and services to families, we look at the reunification, and these would be adults that have been reunified with their families through the shelter services, for example. We also look at how many subsidies or beds we can subsidize at homeless shelters, and of course, families participating in family preservation and support services. So there's support services also provided to families just to improve the cohesion to those families. Under childcare and protection, we measure the number, or we count the number of children placed in foster care, the number of children that we reunify once they've, if they have been removed from their homes. And then also we provide parent education and training programs. ECD and partial care, as I've mentioned, the ECD function has moved over to education. However, we still fund after school care facilities across the province. In terms of child and youth care centres, we subsidise bed spaces in NPO CYCCs, and these are children that fall under the Children's Act. i.e. children have been removed from their homes due to undue circumstances. And then we also have our own CYCCs, which house the children that have been removed under the Children's Act. And we also have an integrated RISIA program, and we also fund RISIA sites. That's community-based services for children. Just looking at the sub-program budget, here you will note that the bulk of the budget goes to childcare and protection for the sub-program, just indicating the emphasis in pursuance of our constitution and legislative mandate. Under sub-program 4, we have restorative services. And here we have crime prevention and support service, crime prevention and support, and probation services are also covered under this sub-program for both children, youth, and adult offenders, as well as their victims. Our victim empowerment program looks at programs to support and can empower the victims of violence and crime, in particular women and children. And then, of course, our substance abuse prevention and rehabilitation program provides the preventative as well as the treatment services and aftercare services. Looking at our crime prevention and support programs, here we measure the number of adults who have been referred to the diversion programs, as well as those who have completed it. Similarly, the number of children who have been assessed for the diversion programs, referred and completed the programs. We also look at the number of children who have been sentenced to secure care, CYCCs, in terms of the Child Justice Act. And then, of course, also the number of children awaiting trial in our secure care centres, in terms of the Child Justice Act. We also have an indicator that measures how many children at risk we've identified and assessed and followed up with for interventions by our own social workers. In terms of victim empowerment, here we look at the number of clients that we can assist with psychosocial support services, or specifically GBV clients. The number of victims of crime and violence who can also access victim support services, human trafficking victims as well as their children are also monitored. And then, of course, the number of victims in crime and violence who access our VEP shelters across the province. In terms of substance abuse, here we have inpatient treatment centres by NPOs that we fund, as well as our own treatment centres, and also the substance abuse treatment that we have in our child and youth care centres. We also provide community-based services for substance abuse, early intervention services, as well as reintegration and aftercare services for those who've completed the programs. Looking at the budget for Program 4, you will note that the bulk of the budget sits with your crime prevention and support services. And that is then followed by substance abuse and victim empowerment. Okay. The last program that we have is our development and research program. Here are 4 sub-programs under this one. We have our institutional capacity building and support for our NPOs. And here we support the NPOs with registration and compliance monitoring, as well as institutional capacity building to help NPOs remain sustainable and have all their governance in place. We also have a poverty alleviation and sustainable livelihoods program, which includes our EPWP program. We have a youth development program, which aims at providing opportunities to develop young people and to ready them for the workforce essentially. And our population policy promotion program looks there in particularly at population research, advocacy, and capacity building in terms of the implementation of that policy. In terms of how we measure ourselves, we look at the number of NPOs capacitated and those assisted with registration under our institutional capacity building program. In terms of poverty alleviation and sustainable livelihoods, we measure the number of subsidized, or rather the number of vulnerable persons who have accessed subsidized meals through departmental funded organizations, and of course the EPWP work opportunities. Youth development looks at the number of youth participating in our programs as well as our funded youth cafes. And then our population policy promotion looks at the evidence base that we can use not only for our own department, but is used across the province in terms of research, demographic profiles, and then of course the capacity building that we do across the province in terms of that kind of information and the advocacy and information role and education role that particular sub-program also fulfills for not only the department, but for the whole province. Looking at the budget, bulk of the budget for this sub-program rests with poverty alleviation and sustainable livelihoods. That is your nutrition program, as well as your EPWP program that sits there, and that is followed by the youth development program. Moving on to the human resources of the department, and this is just a snapshot of employment and vacancies by the department as at the 31st of March of this year. Just to note, this particular slide speaks to the number of active posts in the department. This is not all the posts. We have several unfunded posts in the department due to capacity or rather budget constraints, as it were. We have a total of 2,525 active, i.e. funded posts within the department, of which only 2,444 were filled. And we now have a vacancy of 3.2%. Just to know that this vacancy rate has been increasing over time due to the budgetary constraints. About 3 years ago, it was only 1.9% vacancy rate. And you will note that our largest vacancy rate is under Program 5, followed by Program 2. And you will note that Program 2 is also where the social workers on the front line, the compensation of employees is. Looking at our workload trends then, even though our vacancy rate has been increasing in department, we also need to take cognizance of the fact that the demand out there has also been increasing at the same time. In terms of our active case workload, our social workers currently have 64,222 cases as at the end of June. This is an increase of almost 800 cases from just the previous month. Group work has also increased over the same time period. However, community work projects have declined slightly over the month. Just key ratios to highlight for the committee. For every social work supervisor they have to manage 6 social workers on average across the province. And this is our own staff. This is not including what's in the NPOs out there. One social worker has to service, if we take the entire population of the province into account, 12,125 people. And then the average number of case files per social worker at the end of June this year was 108, whereas the national norm is 60, one social worker to 60 cases, and the international norm is between 16 and 35, depending on the country that you look at. Just in terms of key trends and risks then for the department, in terms of all budgetary risks, focusing on our compensation of employees, our budget constraints have been exacerbated by the freezing of posts, which has limited recruitment. With the current state of the economy, we're also seeing the closure of NPOs increasing. And as a result, we have had to pick up where the NPOs have closed, but placing more pressure on our services as DSD. We also have to face staff attrition as a result of resignations, promotions, and retirement over the past several financial years. And this has also impacted on our ability to render services to the public. There is also a public service regulation amendment that's come out that relates to the reduction from 6 months to 3 months to piggyback off existing recruitment processes. So that has reduced our ability to fill posts essentially at a faster rate. The department has therefore had to identify posts that need to be prioritized in mitigation of the impact on our services, so that we can ensure service delivery and business continuity. So our appointment in non-critical posts have been staggered for the past few months, or more than a year, in fact. We've also reduced non-statutory services over time, prioritizing our statutory services. We've also looked at reprioritizing work, implementing overtime where it's feasible to do so, and we have had to declare some posts unfunded. Looking at the transfer payments, these are the transfer payments to our NPOs in particular. There's been no real growth in transfers and subsidies to NPOs for the furtherance of their operations, despite escalating costs. This reduction has obviously affected the sustainability of the NPO sector, and there's been resulting in the potential collapse of several NPOs due to insufficient funding. Of course, as I've mentioned earlier, the closure of these NPOs places more pressure on the department. This, coupled with the reduction of our own resources, will have a significant impact on our service delivery as a department. Also, we are facing NPO protest action as well as litigation because we are unable to increase subsidies and have had to reduce funding. For example, in Mpumalanga, DSD has been ordered to increase residential care subsidies for disabled to 7,000 Rand per month. And we are expecting more NPOs to institute litigation. We also, unfortunately, have a challenge of fulfilling our monitoring and evaluation objectives, in terms of the NPOs, in terms of monitoring them to make sure that everything is above board, that they are sustainable, etc. And this, of course, increases the risk and financial governance matters within the NPO sector. However, we have committed to maintaining all statutory and court-ordered services, including those being provided by the NPOs. But this has meant that we've had to downsize non-statutory services and funding for non-statutory services to NPOs, including non-residential services, prevention, early intervention, and aftercare services. Anything that is not in the legislation or court-ordered, we've had to reduce due to budgetary constraints. We also have looked at a few areas where we can actually optimize and improve our efficiency, and that includes the use of digital platforms for meetings and workshops and training programs, including engaging with our NPOs, self-assessments and engagements. And then also we have considered optimizing our business units through rationalization or reorganization of the functions if required, so that we do not compromise service delivery. Looking at our human resources key risks, I've indicated earlier that we have a vacancy rate that is increasing due to our fiscal constraints, as it were. And we need to take into account when looking at this, the fact that the migration pattern shows that we still have a net in-migration into our province, so the number of people coming in is increasing. We have the budgetary constraints that also means that we can't fund NPOs as we used to, and we can't fund them more, despite increasing number of clients. And then also the need out there has been increasing due to the economic conditions. Households are less well off than they were a few years ago. And that has increased the need, for example, the new food nutrition program and many other services. And of course, the closure of NPOs places even greater pressure on our department. In terms of our staff safety, we've seen an increase in hijackings of staff. This is, of course, resulting in severe trauma to our staff members, and they also need time to then process that trauma, leading to even fewer social workers on the ground to deliver services. Also, in our child and youth care centers, we have a ratio of 1:35. And if you take into account that we've had a huge demand for placement of children with severe behavioral disorders, this places not only the staff and the residents at risk in terms of security, but also in terms of injuries to staff as well as residents of those CYCCs. We also have our inability to appoint more social workers has also meant that the pressure on our social workers have become almost unbearable, leading to burnout of our staff on the front line. And this, of course, increases your absenteeism and also increases the potential for industrial action by our frontline staff. We've also had a challenge with the delays in our departmental redesign, which of course then limits our ability to be able to have a structure and feet on the ground that is fit for purpose in terms of service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am and Mr. Miller, much appreciated. Honorable members, that brings us to the end of the presentation by the department. Let's just get some lighting. Thank you very much, honorable members. We've come to the point where then you now are able to ask your questions based on what was presented to us this morning by the department. And you may indicate so by a show of hands. I will recognize in the following order, members Van Minnen and member Kasim, member Van Wyk, member Boysen, and member Van Vogel, and member Kamfer. You may proceed, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you want me to ask all my questions in one go, or would you like me to ask them separately?
How many questions?
It's about 3.
You can go.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation. I realize it's a presentation, it's the first time that you're presenting to this Parliamentary Terms Committee. It's a bit unfortunate about the shuffling of the slides in order to keep up, so I hope that we can have a deeper dive at some point. But I've got some questions that have come out of that, if I may. Number 1 on slide 7. You talk about, the department talks about the 22% decrease in drug-related crimes. Is that indicative of a reduction in drug usage, or is that indicative of the policing methods used? Because, you know, that's very much an issue there. And what are you finding coming out of the rehab centers in terms of the actual drug abuse rate? And as part of that, and I realize this might be part of health rather than this department, is the issue of fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. Is that an indicator that you measure, or is that something that is measured by health? Because I know that certainly in large parts of the Overberg, Stellenbosch area, that is a very big problem. I remember going on a visit some years ago to a study in Wellington, and that is very much a concern. So I'd just like to know what the department's position is there, or whether or not it falls under health. Then secondly, and this is why I think it'd be useful to have a deep dive, Madam Chair, in terms of the targets, I've got a couple of concerns. This is a presentation, so it's useful to have the targets, but it would also be useful to have an indication of the current achievement level of those targets from the department. And then really what concerns me is that a lot of the targets seem to be static between 2024 and 2027 with no increase built into them. Now, given the fact that there's an increasing population and all the other indicators that would really indicate a reduction in targets. So I just want to know why that is and what the issues are regarding that. The only one where I see slightly increased targets would be in restorative services. I think slide 25 talks about that. So really that's a concern for me, is what is happening in terms of the 24 all the way through to 27 targeting, why they're staying static, and how those are determined, and is that affected by obviously the issue of staffing and the issue of budget? Thank you.
Thank you very much, member Van Minnen. Member Kasim.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to start on slide 22 first with regards to ECDs. I just wanted to check from the department, how often do the department visit these ECDs, especially when it comes to complaints of negligence? Because I've been receiving ongoing calls from a school in Belhar, which I believe that the department visited several times, and then on Friday the 2nd as well by a Mr. Titus from the department. So the parents has been protesting there, and they've been complaining about negligence and the children not being fed. And these are some of the pictures. These are some of the pictures that the parents have been sending. This is what the kids get on a daily basis: a spoonful of food. You can see these different different pictures. So the parents are complaining they're paying fees, but this is what the kids are getting once a day, apart from the porridge, which is the same amount, and then also negligence. And they say that they've made contact with the department, but the department is not giving feedback to the parents. And then there was a follow-up on Tuesday as well. So that is the first question. I just wanted to check how often, and then what is the update on that case. And then when we go to slide 7, in the beginning of the 6th administration, the Premier mentioned that part of his safety plan was to halve the murder rate. But I see according to slide 7, it says here that the murder rate in the Western Cape increased by 43%. That's the stats for 2013 to 2023. Do you have the stats for 2019 to 2023 with regards to the murder rate in the province? On the same slide with regards to gender-based violence victims, we are only told that 24,564 victims received psychological assistance, but it does not indicate how many were displaced as a result of these abuses, and in the main home, and also in terms of the same victims, how many is homeless and who need shelter. Do you have an indication of that stats as well? On the same slide, Chairperson, we are only told that 29.5% of these victims are in shelters, or sorry, rather homeless people are in shelters, and 14.5% were living in the streets, which gives you a 44%, which is still remaining, which totals to 44%. Can I ask what happened, or where does the other 55% go to on that same slide? And then let me skip that one for now. I want to go to slide 18, Program 1, Administration, the annual targets, for 2025 to 2026 financial year. Why does the target funding for bursaries decrease from 29 to 14 for the financial year? And why does it also move to a 0 in the 2026 to 2027 financial year? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Kasim. Perhaps there's quite a few questions. Colleagues, with your indulgence, I will allow the department to address the questions by members Van Minnen and Kasim at this stage. Perhaps just in terms of drug-related crimes, if you can perhaps just elaborate a bit more on the interventions by the department, as well as those programs made mention of, and what is the successes, those tangible successes that can be seen. And you have given us an indication with regards to the money that will be spent over the next 3 financial years. Just perhaps how is that informed in terms of crime prevention and the necessary support provided to the respective communities. Over to the department, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So I think starting with the Honourable Member Van Minnen's question, the 22% in drug-related decrease in drug-related crimes, I think was primarily indicative of the decriminalisation of cannabis. So we did see a big drop in arrests because of that. So I think that is the main driver of that. The Cape has also, in our experience, been known for police paying a lot of attention to arresting users with relatively small quantities of drugs. So this would particularly shave off numbers because of the approach to policing in the Western Cape. The drug-related crime figures have always been very high in the Western Cape, but it's also been a priority crime. So there's been a lot of policing attention paid to it. So that would have been quite impacted by cannabis being decriminalised. In terms of what we are finding from the drug rehabilitation centres, the drug rehabilitation centres won't necessarily give us a picture of the drug abuse rate in the province, because it is only indicative of people who actually seek assistance or who are referred to the treatment centres. So the demand and the need for treatment certainly remains high. And we don't necessarily think there's a big shift downwards in the need for treatment from our experience. The Sekendu research, which monitors the types of substances that are being used, continues to find that methamphetamine is the highest rate of or the drug that is seeing the most admissions, along with still cannabis, as well as Mandrax, which is making a bit of a comeback. But I think the Sekendo data is something that is gathered by the Medical Research Council. I don't know when the last time they did it was, but yeah, it's fairly consistent over the last 10 years in terms of the type of treatment requirements we're getting. I think in terms of FAS, that the fetal alcohol syndrome monitoring work is done by the Department of Health, because they monitor those births, as well as independent organizations that do research work in partnership with the universities like FAR-SA. We do partner with some of those organizations as well around preventative work, particularly in the high-risk areas. So social development does have a role in terms of prevention and awareness work. But the actual treatment of FAS and support for children with FAS is something that health, together with education, need to work with. And where we do also find that some of our clients have FAS, and we have to work with that along with any other special needs that they may have. The targets, the current achievement levels of the department, I think we can make available the most recent quarterly performance reports on those targets. Well, I mean, the annual report is just about ready, which contains all the achievements. By and large, we've met or exceeded almost all of the targets. There are a couple that we have not achieved. I think it's only about 3 or 4. So the majority of the targets have been met. The targets remaining static for the next 3 years is entirely the result of the budget projections. So we can't increase our targets unless we have increased budget. And that is the concern that was also reflected in the presentation, that the population is indeed growing, and the demand for our services is growing, but our resources are not. And I think that is something that our minister has also made a focus of his approach to this term, to try and see how we can get more efficiencies into the system through the use of information technology, better monitoring processes, more efficient business processes in the department, and also through strengthening our partnerships with donors and so on, to try to maximize the resources that we have available to us. So it is a very difficult situation. We would want to see those targets increase, particularly in certain areas where the demand is increasing. But unless we are able to be sure of getting additional resources, we can't increase those targets. If anything, they could end up reducing further if we are facing further cuts to our budgets. We don't yet have the projections for next year. The budget situation has become so fluid in the last 5 years that we are actually at the point where we can only really project a few months, maybe 6 months at the most, in advance as to what we're expecting the budgets to look like. It's very difficult from a planning perspective as well. But certainly, if we do see the situation improving with the revenue nationally, and the province getting a better share of that as well, then we would begin to increase those targets. So the targets are provisional at this stage, based on a sort of a fairly pessimistic outlook that Treasury and the province has adopted. But we do hope we can increase those. Honourable Member Kasim's question around ECDs. ECD has moved to the Department of Education now, so the Department of Social Development would only visit an ECD if there is a claim of abuse that requires us to intervene to remove children from a dangerous situation. We don't have the legislative role of overseeing ECDs any longer. So the team that was referred to that is visiting the ECD is I think, probably with education.
Yes.
Mr. Titus is the manager of education.
So it's, yeah. You see, Mr. Titus would have been with with DST 3 years ago.
He was, yeah.
But we literally moved the whole team, lock, stock and barrel, from social development to education. So the team is still the same group of people, but they now work for education. The Department of Social Development does still have a function of registering funding and overseeing compliance of after schools, which the legislation left with social development, but the changes to the Children's Act moved all of the ECD functions to education. But certainly that matter would need to be taken up with the Department of Education because it does appear concerning. I think also the fact that parents are paying fees makes that even more so, considering what should be provided on government's subsidies alone. The murder rate statistics, I think we do have statistics for the murder rate up until 2023, I would imagine. There's usually a lag with the murder statistics. I know the murder statistics came down significantly during the COVID lockdown, and then they started to rise again in the last year or so. But that data is available from the SAPS statistics. I think we're also looking at the bigger time frame to see what the patterns are. So within the 3-year period, if I recall correctly, the overall trend has been still lower than the last 10 years, but it's also to be looked at in the context of a growing population. So I think one has to look at it in terms of the murder rate per 100,000. That has, as far as I'm aware, has come down quite a lot in the last 4 years or so. But the COVID lockdown does complicate it a bit. It's hard to see the trend because of that disruption. So I think as things become more stable and in terms of the functioning of the economy, the functioning of society again, we will get back to the point where we can see what the real trends are. The question around the victims who received assistance and how many of those were displaced. We do have the statistics for the number of victims of gender-based violence who have been accommodated in shelters specifically. That shelter stay is, I think, a maximum of 6 months, after which then they try to find a home. I don't know to what extent, Ms. Wilson, we have statistics. You do have, so that could be provided in writing. So a bit more detail can be provided on that. The question around shelters. The Department of Social Development funds shelters. We fund just under 2,500 bed spaces in shelters. But that's not inclusive of the shelters that are funded by the City of Cape Town and other municipalities, as well as the safe spaces that the City of Cape Town has established. It's also not inclusive of shelters that are not funded by the department. So there are also some shelters that we don't necessarily fund, or shelters that are partially funded by the departments, but they also have other bed spaces. I think in addition to that, there are a lot of people currently sleeping rough. So although we do have people in shelters, there's probably just as many, if not more, who are still on the streets, sleeping in tents, sleeping in makeshift structures. So the statistics on homelessness are very unreliable. Because the homeless adults are a moving target all the time. They move around. It's very difficult to identify the same people. Not all of them have identity documents. Not all of them are going to be willing to disclose their details, and they're not obliged to. So the research work that has been done around the numbers of homeless is very much an estimate, and the estimates vary enormously between different researchers. So it is quite difficult to estimate exactly the number of homeless, and then also the definitions of homelessness vary as well between the different research work done. So if homelessness is strictly seen as people sleeping rough, then it's a different figure, for example, from people who are sleeping in highly informal settlements or people who are sleeping in abandoned buildings and those sort of things. So it's a very difficult number to pin down exactly. But I think between the province and the city, there has been a drive to try to get as many people off the streets and into shelters as possible. We are trying to expand shelter space as rapidly as we can. And then particularly focusing on getting people out of spaces that are dangerous. There are informal settlements, for example, that have been established under power lines or next to substations as are very dangerous, as well as informal settlements that are downstream from dams or in catchment areas that can very rapidly flood. So those have been the priority. Also, the structures that get set up on freeways and things like that are also highly dangerous. So the city and the other municipalities have been focusing on moving people away from those areas first. I think also the intention of the department is to continue to try to expand shelter capacity as far as we can. We've got a long way to go. There's no government in the world that's actually solved this issue except for Finland, where they had sufficient funding in their budgets to actually provide housing to every single person who needed it. That is literally the only government in the world that's actually reduced homelessness or rough sleeping significantly to the point of eradicating it. So yeah, it is a global problem that has become extreme since COVID, and much larger budgets have been spent on this issue in other places without significantly impacting the issue. It's a very difficult thing. In terms of the question regarding bursaries, yes, the bursaries funding in the department has decreased currently due to the budget cuts. So we were not able to guarantee funds for bursaries in the outer years of this medium-term period. We have reduced the number to 14 because those are the remaining bursars who are still completing their studies. But we are currently looking at how we can start to reintroduce them. And we are looking at also seeing if we can reprioritize some of our training budgets so we can start to reintroduce bursaries. We currently have had to cut our training budget right down, but we are looking to see whether we can shift some of that funds around from paid for training and some of the other short-term training that we do to instead institute bursaries again, because that is preferable from our perspective. So we're hoping it's not going to stay at zero, but that's the provisional situation. I think the severity of the budget cuts, particularly also with the increased salaries for staff, has just crowded out much room for anything other than the essentials. Chairperson, the question around the successes from our drug treatment programs and what social development does in the area of substance abuse treatment. The department offers a continuum of substance abuse services ranging from the preventative and early interventions through to treatment and reintegration services. So depending on where the clients are at, we try to provide services that are appropriate to the situation that the people need. So I think that the statistics on the number of people that we have provided treatment for are included in our performance information, as well as those who receive brief interventions, which is short-term counseling for people who are at risk, but not necessarily requiring intensive rehabilitation services. We have also tried to adapt our treatment and substance use prevention services to the particular needs of the people in this province. So there has been quite a shift towards providing services to younger clients who are under 18. Particularly over the years, we've introduced school-based treatment programs as well as treatment programs in our secure care child and youth care centres. And we're finding that works quite well to get the clients younger into programs to try and prevent the escalation of addiction. So we are seeing a recidivism rate in the treatment programs that is, I think, aligned more or less with global norms. I think we can provide you the last most recent evaluation work we've done on this, and the recidivism rates are usually around 40% for treatment programs. I stand to be corrected, but it's somewhere around there. So 60% or more success rate for treatment programs is considered to be globally on par with what's to be expected, given that addiction is a recurring illness, and that quite often people will need to attend treatment more than once. It's more of a process than a kind of washing machine type of model where you put in a dirty item and it comes out clean. It's not as mechanical as that. So treatment programs and treatment processes tend to be iterative and take a number of years to actually yield results. And it can also be a process of harm reduction as well, where you begin to help people move away from the most severe behaviors to less damaging, less harmful behaviors. So it is a very challenging area to get results, but we have done an evaluation on our community-based treatment programs, and there's a lot of issues that we've picked up, including things like the fact that a lot of people drop out of the programs due to transport issues and so forth. So there's still room for improvement in many areas, and also I think that where we need to look at the efficiencies of these programs to see where we can do better. But I think the funding model we have with NGOs is very cost effective from a public spending perspective, because the subsidies we pay to the NGOs is vastly cheaper than it would be if we had to render those services ourselves. And it does give us a much bigger spread of services. So I think it's a very successful model that we have partnering with the NGO sector. It gives us a lot of reach. So I think that was the questions that I've noted down, Chairperson. You can let me know if I missed anything.
Thank you very much, Dr. McDonald. At this point, colleagues, based on the response received, Member van Minnen, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Kasim.
Go ahead. With regards to the homeless people who are without IDs, I just wanted to check, does the department consider having any programs to assist them in terms of getting that IDs? Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Judy.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jordan might want to add, but we have had various drives to help the people get IDs in partnership with the NGOs. The shelters are very good at also pulling in Home Affairs to assist with getting IDs.
Thanks, Honourable Member. Just would like to add. So we fund about 57 shelters, homeless shelters across the province. And within those shelters, we fund a social worker and a social auxiliary worker that's on premises. And part of their job is to assist those homeless people with applying for IDs and things like that. So it's not only for the people sleeping there, so also the people that sleep rough on the street. They are usually informed, because sometimes they do go there for food. It's not necessarily that they sleep there. But the social worker is always on site to even assist the one sleeping rough and not sleeping in the shelter, to provide those kinds of services. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Member van Wyk.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Yes, by just looking at this presentation and what we've received, to me, I'm seeing a department that's probably under a fair amount of distress in terms of the challenges that you must have. Because if you look at the population increase, there's certainly been there. But if one also looks at your budget increase and just taking from 2021 up to 24-25 over these 4 years, you're seeing only a 13.29% increase. So if you average it out, it's 3.3 a year. In reality, it's even less than 3.3. Now, that is you're heading for trouble. And, I imagine you are in trouble already. And you've got two real lines of expenditure: the compensation to employees, and obviously what you're paying out to the MPOs. Now, I just looked at those two over the years, 86% of your total, and 85% now for this year. And clearly, it's almost like trying to provide some form of spread on a slice of bread. I think you've got to the point now where I don't know how you shave to put less of a spread on the bread now, because I really feel for you in terms of the amount of work that you have, and looking at the number of case files per social worker, that's totally out of line. So to me it almost looks like, if I'm bold to say, you probably need double the amount of budget than you are getting. And we're sitting with this heck of a predicament where we got the fiscal cuts that we have. And I suppose what we need to start looking at is how, what else can we do to try and fix, to just maintain that level of work that you're doing. And in reality, it's probably a lot more than what you are doing, that you should be doing. And, I just wonder, I see, for instance, our contributions to non-profit institutions has actually gone down over this 4-year period. And I would imagine that a lot of those NPOs are struggling too. And what you're saying is there's critically important work that they need to do there. Is there not something that we should be doing to try and encourage more donations and more money going into NPOs? And, how, what could we do from this side to try and encourage that? Because, trying to get money from, call it the corporate sector, possibly also the individual sector, being donated into worthy causes like that can continue the work, while we also have to then battle, I suppose, to get a bigger slice of the cake out of national. But me, it's a concern that we almost fighting a losing battle here. And how, and it's perhaps something that this committee then, that we must try and look and see what one can do, and what role can committee play to try and improve these difficulties. Because to me, we sit this case files per social worker. If we look what our situation is compared to the national norm, not even to get to that international norm, it's difficult. It's got to be very, very difficult what you're doing without getting down to micro level, as some of my colleagues have spoken about. So I'm not sure how, I'm just looking at that, call it the more macro type of issue. And then we possibly don't have answers today, but maybe it is something that we need to reflect upon. And how does one do, and how does one champion? To me, the biggest leverage is possibly by getting more donor funding into those NPOs, and really identifying and making sure that the NPOs are doing the best that they can with whatever funding that they have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Member Van Wyk. Member Boyson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, just for the record, in my previous work, I had a very good relationship with this department, and hopefully that would continue. And seeing this, and what Member Van Wyk have touched on, is a very tight rope. So I'm not going to get into some more requests. But my question is, Chairperson, is there any role which the department can play in assisting initiation schools? Or where should I go and knock?
Thank you very much, Member Boyson. Colleagues, I think after this too, I will also directly hand over to the department. Perhaps just from my side, Dr. McDonald, it was quite a shock to the system to hear about attacks and hijackings on social workers. I mean, if you look at the extent of work that they're doing, at the scope of work that they're doing, it's totally uncalled and unheard of. It doesn't make sense, to say the least. And I think it's now exactly the same as emergency medical workers has been experiencing as well. Are we currently at the stage where social workers also have to be escorted by the police to go and do their work? How many cases over the past 5 years has been reported? Are those cases actually reported to the police, and what is the status on those cases? Is it taken seriously? But also, how does it impact, I can only imagine, on the morale of the staff doing their daily tasks and being of assistance to our communities? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll start with Honourable Member van Wyk's question about the issue of what the committee can perhaps do in terms of support. I think it's 100% correct that we need to try and tap into more donors, and that's something we're looking at the moment. Our minister is very keen on that. At the same time, the National Social Development Department is also trying to get a more coherent case for National Treasury to give us additional funds, particularly for social workers. Unfortunately, recently there was some extra funds found by National Treasury for health workers and educators to assist education and health from the worst of the cuts that was implemented this year, but social workers weren't included, and we missed out there. Our Provincial Treasury to some degree tried to help mitigate that, and they did, and we appreciate that from their side. But I think that it is something that the National DSD needs to find a better way of making a case to National Treasury. We're trying to assist them with that as well. So, for example, to get better data on exactly what the social workers are doing, exactly what the need is, so that they can convince Treasury that this is something that needs to be done. Unfortunately, the bids at national level haven't always been sufficiently clear and compelling to get the National Treasury to agree to provide additional funds to social development, because the argument is that they are not convinced that resources that are already there are being optimally utilized. So that is one of the difficulties, is getting the whole sector to a stage where it can make really effective national bids. The other issue, of course, is the province being able to make a sufficiently robust case for more funding, as the Premier pointed out in the State of the Province or opening of Parliament address, should I say, to get the fair share of the Western Cape's budget. There has been an unfortunate trend in the country where some of the provinces that are less populous than the Western Cape are getting more funds than the Western Cape, on the argument that they need more money. And a lot of that is to do with the quintile systems and so on that are not very accurate. One of the big issues we have in the Western Cape is there's a lot of schools that are considered to be higher quintile schools that are wealthy because of where they are, but they're not actually wealthy schools. There's a lot of inner city schools in Cape Town, for example. The majority of the learners in those schools are actually from poorer areas, and they come into these schools on a daily basis with a very long commute. Yet those schools are high quintile schools because of where they are situated. Now, that kind of situation feeds into the type of money our province gets, because the school quintile system is one of the big determinants of the equitable share that each province gets. So these are some of the things that the Provincial Treasury is working on trying to change, so that the calculation approach to how much money the province gets is more effective. Unfortunately, social development on its own doesn't have anything that feeds directly into the equitable share formula to the same degree that the quintile system and the number of clients in our hospitals do. So that's a big issue, because if we can get that right, it will mean there's more money available for everything here. I think the other issue is also that in the last 10 years, we've seen the lotto really become increasingly scarce as a source of additional support to NGOs. And that is something that I think requires looking at as well, because the lotto used to be quite a good source of additional funds to the NGOs that help supplement what the province can give them. And that's has really gone downhill significantly in the last 10 years. Partly, I think, due to management issues there. I'm not sure what else. I think they changed some of their policies, but it has had quite a severe negative effect on the NGO sector as an alternative source of funding. But we are also committed to finding a way to better support the NGOs with sourcing donor funding during this term. We realize we have to do that because we have to try and keep these NGOs afloat. I mean, if we look at the larger NGOs, Western Cape Social Development probably funds around a third of what they need to run. So they're still very heavily reliant on donors, and we have to try and support that. So we do appreciate the honourable members' view that the committee would like to support. We would welcome that. In terms of the question from the honourable member Boyson, the role of social development in initiation schools, social development does have representatives on the initiation school support work. There's a task team that's put together by the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport every year to assist with the initiation schools, and social development is represented on that structure, but the Cultural Affairs and Sport Department is the lead agent for that. In terms of the question from the Honourable Chairperson, the attacks and hijackings of social workers, we probably can provide the statistics in a written response. I can't tell you exactly what they are, but I mean, we've been having about one a week this year. It's been extremely bad this year in particular. It's escalated very sharply in the last year. So we are now at the point where we are now going to be unmarking vehicles in the high-risk areas. The Department of Mobility is assisting us with unmarking the vehicles, changing the number plates so that they're not government number plates any longer, and looking at putting additional trackers into the vehicles, because the syndicates that are hijacking our vehicles seem to be able to locate and remove the existing trackers very quickly. So there's definitely technical expertise among the hijackers who are taking our vehicles. They know how to deal with trackers. They know where they are. We don't know to what extent they may have some links within the government or within the tracking companies or both. But there is definitely the existing trackers are no use. So we need to strengthen that. We are also looking at giving staff the option to purchase their own subsidized vehicles that they can do in terms of the vehicle subsidy scheme for public servants. It is something they've also implemented in KwaZulu-Natal because of the same issue. So we're looking at how well that's going for them in terms of reducing the hijacking, because it does seem that there's a specific targeting of government vehicles. I'm not sure exactly why that is. It never used to be the case. It's just really, it's become a major thing just in the last year or so. We have had a number of hijackings and so forth before that too, but it was much more sporadic. So there seems to be now some syndicate that's specifically focusing on this. We do also tell our social work staff that if they're going into a high risk area, they must take a police escort with them. If they can't take a police escort, then they must wait until one is available. So it is the same principle that's being applied with the ambulances. Unfortunately, in some instances as well, the police themselves aren't willing to go into some of these areas because of the level of risk, which makes things particularly difficult. Philippi East is one of those areas where the police themselves are reluctant. So it's getting to that point now. We do also have a good working relationship with the LEAP officers in the area-based team sites where the LEAP officers have been deployed, and they also assist our teams who are part of the area-based teams with intelligence on where the risks are at the moment, and they have also accompanied the social workers at times. So I think the improving of local coordination between social workers and the law enforcement agencies is another area we also trying to use to increase the safety, but it's really severe. I mean, we had last week a combi bus full of staff was hijacked with the staff in it, and they were driven around for a while before they were dropped off, and then the vehicle was crashed elsewhere. So yeah, it's becoming increasingly traumatic for the staff. We did have a staff member shot as well. We haven't had any fatalities yet, I'm thankful to say, but yeah, it's becoming increasingly dangerous for the staff. We are also providing trauma counselling to staff when they have experienced these incidents, and you know, but it does severely impact their functioning, depending on the severity of the incident. So yeah, thanks, Chair. That's the last of the questions I have.
Thank you very much, HOD. Perhaps just in terms of the reporting of those cases and the response of SAPS to those cases. If you find that to be
Yes, maybe
efficient and effective?
Chair, yeah, we are really appreciative. It's a integrated response, both from community safety, if it's in the metro area, from the LEAP officers, the city law enforcement, as well as in the police. During the hijacking, where our staff was kept in the vehicle, and the whole of the police services have been, I never heard of some of the units that they've activated. So we're quite appreciative of that.
Yeah, I think also with the laying of the cases afterwards, all those cases are laid. We have to, because you know, the vehicles, there's a process we go through if a vehicle has been stolen, which is standard. So yeah, those cases have been laid. I don't know to what extent we've had any kind of outcome of those cases. Maybe, I don't know, CFO, if you're aware of any outcomes.
Through you, HOD and Chairperson. Yeah, at this stage not, but we can find out in terms of that. And as the HOD mentioned, normally the reporting must take place within 24 hours of the incident, and that we also track in terms of that. So it means there's affidavits and things that needs to be done, and we also follow up from our side in terms of that. And the unfortunate thing is that when, you know, something happens to these vehicles, unfortunately we need to write them off, basically, because I think in most cases these vehicles just leaves the country in terms of that, as far as that goes. And now, hopefully, with the new trackers and the enhancements around that, hopefully that will be of assistance. But we also find that maybe government is becoming a soft target, because, as you know, a staff member should ideally also not just resist in terms of the hijacking, rather than just allow that they do what they need to do, so that we prevent injuries and harm in terms of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, just an interesting thing. We had recent meetings with the Department of Justice, and they experienced the same phenomena with the court staff that have to travel, especially the translators and so on that comes from specific areas. And they have now launched an internal investigation to see if there's a cooperation between I don't know where they get their vehicles, and organized crime. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that input as well. I note that you mentioned, HOD, in terms of staff receiving trauma counseling, but I can imagine that you cannot predict the longer term impact of such an occurrence to a specific staff member. Have you seen absenteeism people resigning because of this, or caseloads piling up because of these occurrences?
Yeah, I don't, not significant. I think you've had, Mr. Hewu, some instances where staff have been quite severely affected, and it's resulted in them needing to take a fair bit of time. I think for the most part, we've seen people bounce back quite fast, but the problem is now, of course, that it restricts our movements as well, because we do not think it's ethical to ask staff to put clients in vehicles and then face the risk of being hijacked. When the staff go out and remove children and think they're not going to be able to help a child if they take a child from a dangerous situation into an even more dangerous situation. So it means that they have to restrict their movements to when the SAPS is available to go with them. And that does affect our operations, because it means potentially clients who need urgent assistance will have to wait, and that is detrimental. So the biggest concern, I think, is the fact that our operations are getting curtailed. And I think that, there are some areas where that is going to be very negative for the people who live there. We are also now looking at seeing to what extent we can ask people to come to the office for assistance, and even cover the costs of their transport if we have to reduce the movements of our staff as far as possible in those areas.
Much HOD colleagues. At this point, we've got two other members indicating that they wish to pose questions. That was members Kamfer and Winvogel. You must just please refresh my memory in terms of the order. Was it you first, member Winvogel? May I ask, member, that at this point that we take a short comfort break and return back at 11 o'clock. Then we will deal with the two remaining questions, and hopefully by 11:30 we can excuse the department to go about their very important work. Will that be in order? Thank you so much, members. We will now take a comfort break and refreshments outside for you to enjoy. We will then be back at 11 o'clock.
Done any resolutions. It's trying to start information. Yeah, it's information request. So my yes. But no, she has a metal rates.
That's why some members never like us to when they pay. I've never done this. Which three have you done? They're very much. Like getting. Doctor, I think it's still. Awful. Very weird.
Then there's the directions of statistics for their attention, I think. Yeah. Visit. Do you still want to do the visit on the 23rd of September? 23rd to 27th.
During the constituent.
Yeah, that's one to Southern Cape. Maybe we can do a joint with health, because they also have a blend. And it was going to be towards the end of September. So I think.
I don't like sharing anymore.
But the numbers are the same. So we can do.
It's probably more cost effective.
We have done that in the
Can't
past.
split you in two.
Yeah. But besides, we have done that in the past last year when we went to Beaufort West and Southern Cape. So we had slots that were divided. For example, yeah. So I think, but then we left on Sunday and then we started on Monday.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we can.
We start at the furthest point. Welcome
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, but where are we going?
We must still talk.
Yeah, okay. I think we.
Let me first welcome the presentation of the presentation of the Department of Labor, Department of Social Development, and also congratulate them on at least reaching most of the targets. And the clean audit, although clean audit does not ensure service delivery. Chairperson, my first question is going to be on page 7. Let's say, or slide 7. In respect of the high incidence of sexual, the rate of sexual offences in the province, I want to check with the department. Does the department have a strategy to address this challenge? Because if you look at the figures, it's scary. 71,689. It's scary. So do they have a strategy to address this challenge? Then secondly, Chair, what is the department's seriousness about combating GBV and sexual harassment within provincial government? And can we get details of the department's involvement in the sexual harassment case against the HOD of local government? As I understand, the matter was also reported to the previous MEC. Then, Chairperson, on page 15, the organizational structure, can the department take us in confidence which posts are not filled yet that they are busy with? And then on page 16, you mentioned about your service points. Do you have social workers at all your service points in the province? Then, Chair, on page 21, sub-program, the social relief, the sanitary packs dispatched to identify schools and facilities. I want to check in terms of, you refer to facilities, what do you mean by facilities? So if I can get clarity, my understanding was the schools are actually, you are providing schools with sanitary packs. Then, Chair, the after school program, page 23. Page 23, it's actually wonderful to hear that there is such a program. And I really, because there is a need in our communities. Remember, our parents, they normally left early in the morning to go and work, and the kids are left alone after school. There's no one. So I'm really happy to hear there is such a program. But what I want to understand, where in the province and how many do we have? I think the youth cafe thing, I have a discussion with Mr. Heu, so I'm covered there. I think I will park there, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Member Van Vogel, and you will also have the opportunity to pose follow-up questions should the need arise. Member Kamfer, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson and colleagues. Chair, Honorable Kasim, touched a lot of my questions, 3 of my questions about the schools and ECD. So I have only one question, and that is a simple and a short question. Chair, what I like from you in department is only what I would like to. What is the distribution about the department budget and the resources to the regions? That is the only question what I have to you in this morning. What is exactly the distribution about the budget to the regions and to all the regions in the whole province? That is a simple question, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate. Thank you, Member Kamfer. Over to you, HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On the question of social development, having from Honourable Member Windvogel, does DSD have a strategy to address gender-based violence? I'll ask Ms. Wilson to speak to that.
Yes, we are in our 4th year of the strategy on the provision of on the delivery of the strategy in terms of gender-based violence. And part of that, it's an interdepartmental strategy. So it means it's not only social development, but we are coordinating and chairing that. So in terms of specifically sexual offences, and so forth, we are involved with our stakeholders in terms of police, SAPS, Department of NPA Justice, as well as community safety. And these specific strategies. Then there was also the earmark project in terms of the protection orders that is not effectively executed within the province. And a specific task team has been appointed by the Premier through a specific process, which also then involve all the stakeholders. And in addition, also the NPO sector, like Mosaic and the Women's Centre. And there we have focused on 3 specific strategies to unblock the services in terms of the protecting of victims. The first one is then the referral pathway across all sectors. We tend to focus on only a referral pathway for social development or a referral pathway only for SAPS, but we have now an integrated referral pathway. Then also the handling of police stations is our second focus area. When a victim report, empowering the police stations and training for police officials, but also in terms of the area of victim support rooms. And there we successfully are busy to engage with business against crime, outsurance, as well as some things. I can't remember the third one. It's forensic investigations. That are, it's an organization that does forensic investigations. And of course, then our own services come into play. And the third one is then the psychosocial support at courts. Everywhere where the victim moves, there we have provided services or try to enhance our services. Then, of course, we have our shelter services, which we have quickly increased our services in the past 3 years with another 6. And we, in the Overberg, they already are semi-opened the new centre in Caledon, just sorting out the funding component of that. But the municipality of Theewaterskloof took our hands with regards to that. And then, of course, each department have their own focus, like in schools, in health, in home affairs, and how they deal with trafficking and so on. So there's a lot of work and resources across the province going into that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hurston. Also, just to add that the provincial government's strategy is formulated as a implementation strategy for the national cabinet approved NSP, National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. So the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence was approved by the National Cabinet. It was about 4 years ago. Was it 3 years ago? And that called on all organs of state to develop implementation plans. So we did create an implementation plan based on the pillars of the National Strategic Plan. So it's structured around those 5 pillars. And we are doing our part in each of those pillars. The SAPS also has their own implementation plan. I think Justice probably does as well, but we coordinate for the province. Social development is the lead on GBV, and all departments are participating in that. So we have the coordinating role, and all departments have their role within that. We have, I think, previously presented to the committee on that implementation plan. We can do so again in future. So the question on social development and its role in addressing GBV within the provincial government internally, the Social Development is the coordinator of the GBV implementation plan. And one of the aspects of the implementation plan is addressing workplace harassment. The lead agent or lead person or body, shall I say, responsible for that that aspect of the implementation plan is the Corporate Services Centre, which during this time has developed an updated harassment policy, workplace harassment policy, which was run past the unions last year and adopted as a new updated policy. It's a very robust policy. I think the execution of those matters is dealt with by a Corporate Service Centre. Social Development doesn't have the standing to get involved in disciplinary investigations or harassment investigations that involve staff. It has to be done in terms of the Public Service Act procedures by the relevant executive authority of the department in which the complaint's received. So, if we receive complaints as a department about someone in another department, we have to refer that to the Department of the Premier and the MEC of the relevant department so that they can conduct the necessary investigation in terms of the Public Service Act rules. So Social Development wouldn't get involved in those cases because then we would be outside of the Public Service Act prescribed processes. The question regarding the organizational structure, which posts are not filled yet, in which we are in the process of filling, that information is available. We can provide that. It's quite detailed. So if the committee would like to see that, we can do so. The service points, do we have social workers at all our service points in the province? Yes, we do. All the service points and local offices are run by the social workers and their auxiliary social workers, community development practitioners, as well as in some of the big offices, admin support staff as well. So yeah, that's our service points. The question on social relief, the sanitary packs, the facilities that are provided with those sanitary packs besides schools is NGOs that are running child and youth care centres. So they provide it to the girl children who require them in the NGO child and youth care centres as well. It's not huge numbers compared to the schools. But we do provide some support there because there's been a specific request for that support from those child and youth care centres. The question about the after school program, we can provide the details of where where in the province those after schools are situated and how many there are. We do have that information available, but we'd have to provide it in writing because it's a long list. Unfortunately, we did have some budget cuts in the after school space. We lost some of the after school centres this year. It was one of the areas that got quite a significant cut in the budget, and it is very unfortunate from our perspective because of the importance of these centres. At the same time, we fortunately do also have the Department of Education and the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport also supplementing aftercare activities. So social development funds and registers formal aftercares, but there are a lot of after school activities that are being run from schools as well, like the mod centres, as well as Department of Education managed aftercares where they provide the school space for people to do activities in the afternoon. So between social development, education and cultural affairs and sports, we are trying to maximize the coverage of after school activities for children, because we recognize the importance of that, providing a protective environment for children who may not have their parents at home. But yeah, we are hoping we'll be able to bring back some of that funding if the budget cuts relent in the near future. The question from Honourable Member Kamfer on the distribution of DST budget per region in the province. We do have that information. It is in our annual report, so we can provide that to the committee. Again, quite detailed information would have to be provided in written format. We have a breakdown per region, and we also have a breakdown per municipality and I think per district as well, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure, but we do provide breakdowns per municipal boundary and per our social development regions. So we can provide that information to the committee, but it is also in the annual report. If you'd like to look at that immediately, you can just go online. Our last annual report is online, and that information is included in the annual report. Our new annual report is due quite shortly, so the committee will also receive that in the next few weeks, I would think. Yeah, so in a few weeks, you'll get our latest annual report. So yeah, that's the questions I have. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, HOD. Member Van Vogel, any follow-up questions?
Yes, Chair, mine, it's on the after-school program. Perhaps, because my understanding when you speak about mod center, it falls under the part sport and culture. So I want to understand, how do you fit as a social development? Because I'm aware of the mod center, the after school programs, activities that they are doing at schools. So I want to understand your involvement, how that, yeah, your role that you are playing. And then lastly, Chair, I do understand the HOD in terms of his explanation when it comes to the HOD issue, that my question on the HOD. So you were, I just want to check, are you aware of such an incident? Your department, were you informed of such an incident? I understand the process and protocol that you need to follow. So I just want to check with you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member. Actually.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On the after schools and how social development fits into that situation, the after schools are in social development space are called partial care centres in terms of the Children's Act, and those have to be registered. So partial care centres that are actually dedicated sites for the purpose of providing after school care for children that are separate and distinct from schools. Something that social development then has to register in terms of the Children's Act. And we also fund some of those centres as well. We fund them for their operations. 72 or 70, 76. Okay, so 76. The aftercares then are, in that sense, formal aftercares that we register. The mod centres are a separate thing. They do provide after school space for children as well, but they are usually at schools, and they don't need to be registered with social development because they're not operating as partial care facilities. They are actually either part of the school or part of a sports club, and they are operated for activities and recreation. So they're a different kind of legal concept, but in essence, they have the same benefit in that they provide a space after school where there's adult supervising and so on. So that is the difference. Giles, you can also add.
Yeah, Honourable Member, I think the big distinction is the ones we register and fund is run by NGOs, whereas the other two are run by departments. So that's why they actually mentioned we don't have to register them. So the functions are basically the same, providing after school care for the children, nutritional meals, help with schoolwork, homework, sporting activities, and so forth. When it comes to the mod centres or even the after school centres as at schools, the relationship between us and them is that if there's any child that they pick up that needs psychosocial support or interventions, and they usually pick that up while they're interacting with those children at the mod centres, then they will immediately refer that child to social development so that we can do an intervention with the family and the child. Because that's usually the children get a lot of confidence when they are quite a while at some of the centres. They get trust in the leader there or the project guy or lady, and then they open up. And that's where the stuff comes out. So there is understanding they must refer those children immediately to DSD. So that's where we get involved with their centres. But we don't run or manage their centres. We only register the NGOs ones, and we monitor them according to norms and standards of the Children's Act. And some of them that we fund and some of them we don't fund. But yeah, so we've got a list of the ones that we've registered so that we can provide. But just to understand, that's not the only ones in this whole province, besides education and sports own centres. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Jordan. Then in terms of the sexual harassment matter referred to, the Department of Social Development did not receive any formal complaint of that nature. I believe the ministry received a complaint that was then directed to the correct process, but I don't know the details of that.
Thank you very much, HOD. Colleagues, at this point, that deals with our questions for this morning. Is there any burning question? Member Kasim, I see your hand.
Before we conclude with this, I just wanted to check the aftercare, the after school care. No? Is it a free service, or is it, because I noticed that you're funding these NGOs, like you said, would you also be able to assist with a list of those? Because I see on the targets here, there's 55, 55, 55. Then you also mentioned 75. So I just wanted to double check with that. Is it 55 or 75? And then is it free services, or are parents paying for these aftercare services?
Thank you, Member.
Yeah, honourable member. If you look at the targets, the 55 is what we are planning on registering. So that indicator specifically refers to the registering. The 75, 76 I was talking about was in the 23-24 financial year, where we funded those number. So that's the difference between that number. With regards to the ones that we fund, most of the places do ask a contribution from the parents, but there's a lot of them, especially in poor communities, where they don't. So they're purely dependent on the subsidy we provide per child. But I must add, actually, all of that after schools are not in middle class and high income communities. This is people that really can't afford the money to really contribute significantly. So that's why we subsidize them as well. So that's where all our money goes in. So the subsidization goes into that they can use it for the salaries of the staff, they can use it for the food, and for any activities that they need to do with the children. That's what the subsidy can be used for. So yeah, that's in essence the difference between those different targets.
Thank you very much. Happiness, Member Kasim. Thank you so much. Any other questions, Member Kamfer?
Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Chair, a humble request to you and to the administrators. You know, from where I come from, a very different situation in the rural area. Our people, our communities suffer to enter or to go out of the town currently now in Citrusdal, in the Cederberg area. You don't have access to go on specific or social development or any other area. All the service is out of the town. You must go to Friedendal, you must go to Friedenberg for service. So my question is, what will the department to do to help our people? That is my first question of my humble plea to you. Can you real or organize, or who can you assist our communities for more than 2 months? He sit in town with a lot of challenges. He can't now go out of the town for work. He's only citrus people he can go because he used the farmer bridge of the road to go out of the door for town to work. The other thing is Chair, we would like to invite you to the area for a visit. Please, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Member Kamfer. Member, if I understand you correctly, you are saying that there's normally service points, but due to the disaster of this time that we had, it is a bit of a challenge. So you would just like to know what the department is doing in that regard, how people access these services. Dr. McDonald?
Thanks. I'll ask Mr. Hill to give some inputs on what social development has done to assist. But I think obviously the main issue is getting the road back, because that makes it extremely difficult. So social development has been able to provide some short-term assistance with the help of NGO partners. But the getting that road established is the first priority, and that the Department of Infrastructure is busy with that. I don't know what the progress is on that, but I do know they're trying to build it better this time because they put temporary repairs in last year after it was destroyed last year, and then it got destroyed again. So they're going to have to create a different structure this time that can withstand another flood, so we don't have this problem again. But I'll ask Mr. to speak to the relief.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was saying, Chair, he has already given the response. All I can add is we correctly mobilizing and mobilize the support from the NGOs, both in the area and outside the area, to support with humanitarian support that is required in the meantime, whilst people are unable to access these services. Otherwise, the rest of the HOD has indicated. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have social development's role in disasters is humanitarian relief, but we can't. We work together with the other departments and the municipalities with that, but we can't answer for the work that has to be done now to connect the town. And the services, yeah, that we provide.
Social services, statutory work.
Yeah, no, we are also introducing mobile service points to try and reach some of the towns that are more difficult to reach. And that's something to get to some of the rural areas that we don't have service points in yet. So those mobile service points are coming this year, the first season. But I think also the immediate problem of accessibility to Citrusdal is the big issue. If I understand the member's question correctly, right now the services are not coming in there, and they only really brought in humanitarian relief with the assistance of helicopters and other special vehicles to get in there.
Thank you very much, Dr. McDonald. Member Van Vogel?
Yeah, just a follow-up on the question of Member Comfort. Chair, is there a possibility that the department can provide those people or those NGOs who are assisting our people in that area? The member just mentioned something about the absence of social development while people don't have food and what. So if we can get that information so that they can share it with the community, that's where not all of them will be helped, but at least if you can support some of those families. So if we can get that information. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Van Vogel. Colleagues, I am going to wrap up the conversation at this point. We are all honorable members and we all serve constituents, and I'm very much sure that given the need, as indicated initially by Member Kamfer, there is parliamentary mechanisms for us to gain the necessary information. But I'm also sure through the department and the minister's office to get the necessary information, because it is quite dire that people do have access to services and be able to provide it with those assistance that they so desperately need. So I'm sure that mechanisms are open for members to explore during these very trying times for those communities. HOD?
Apologies, Chair. Maybe also to say that if there is details of families that need immediate assistance, the honourable members can also provide that to us so that you can help us locate anyone that we may have missed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. Honourable members, that deals with our session with the department this morning. Very productive engagement, and we do look forward to the next one. So thank you so much, HOD and the entire team for indulging this committee this morning. And of course, members will have the opportunity, as I said, through further parliamentary mechanisms to pose their questions in the House, and their written and oral questions, and through the various emails in gathering more information. Thank you so much, and you must have a most blessed and wonderful day further. Thank you.
The moment when we start, the program. Is it this?
Yeah.
Pension for women or
Under the circumstances.
important for you?
This one.
They
Given
will
that
do this. Yeah.
switch the two. Colleagues that are currently in the meeting, Namonde has jotted down some notes in terms of information requested by from the department, some resolutions. Perhaps Namonde, you can just read them out and members can just amend or add what we've left out.
Okay, thank you, Chair, through you. I've dotted out 8 requests for information. The department will provide the committee with quarterly achievement targets. Moderate statistics for up to 2023 will be submitted to the committee. A detailed report on the number of victims of gender-based violence accommodated in shelters will also be provided. The evaluation report for the substance abuse treatment program will also be made available to the committee. The department will also submit statistics for the attacks and hijacking of social workers. Detailed information on the vacancies that are not filled and those that are in a process of being filled. Detailed information on the location of the after program, your after school program, and the and I think and a number of those. I don't know whether that is whether I sorry. Private schools. You want the okay, detailed report. Okay, let me rephrase that. Detailed report. For the after school program. Okay, and the report on the distribution and allocation of the SD budget allocation per region. Those are the 6, but members, if they have additional information that they need, I can dot it down so that it can form part of our minutes.
Okay, Namonde, so the latter part of the resolutions, the department indicated that it is part of the annual report.
Yes.
Can I please ask that we then provide an extract for the members? We don't have to request that from the department. It's already available. Thank you. Members, any other additions? Happiness? Namonde, that deals with the resolution?
Yes, Chair, for this meeting.
Honorable members, we then move along with the agenda. We are now at point 2 of the agenda. The consideration and the adoption of the minutes dated the 4th of July. We'll remember that we had a Teams meeting for that specific meeting. Please do check your attendance. And we basically dealt with the election of the chairperson, moved by Member Boyson, seconded by Member van Minnen, agreed to, and that was the business of that specific day. Honorable members, can I get a proposer?
Yeah.
Member van Minnen and Member van Wyk,
Yeah,
second.
I think just as part of, before proposing, Chair, I just noticed under alternate members that Member Boyson's name is included there as part of it. So I think there's probably just that correction that would need to be made.
Thank you very much, Member van Wyk. Colleagues, we can then agree that we adopt the minutes dated the 4th of July 2024 with the amendment removing Member Boyson's name under alternate members. Are we in agreement, members? Thank you very much. Colleagues, that takes us to point 3 on the agenda, the consideration and adoption of the draft committee program. All honorable members have received the draft committee program and was asked to please provide some input by the 1st of August. Namonde, if you can perhaps just take us through the inputs received by members? Was there any?
No, majority of the members.
yeah,
concur
agreed.
with what- Yes.
Sure. That is also what I saw on my side, that members agreed, because that you members will remember I also engaged with you, and that what you mentioned, what you would want to address in the committee were basically captured within the program. So there might be a slight change to the program, but we will keep in touch with you based on legislation that was referred to the committee that may impact on our program. But as sure as Namonde has got timeline for us, we will then work that timeline into the draft program, and then we'll communicate that with members to see how that will impact on our program.
Okay. And
please go ahead.
Yeah. And Chair, I will also, we received members, the referral of the Older Persons Amendment Bill, which is a Section 76 bill for the NCOP. So there are timeframes there. I'm going to sit with the chairperson and we'll draft the program according to the NCOP. But in the meantime, I'm going to email the bill to the members so that you can go through and read it. Then once we come up with the program, then we can send it to the members.
Sure. So yeah, hit the ground running. Member Van Vogel?
Since
the program.
So is there a possibility to add over one?
Yeah. You know, this is our working document. And now we agree on the principle of this is what we want to do on the specific dates. But you will also remember, member, that as we go along, there might emanate certain matters from a session that we had, and then we amend our program to include those matters or oversight visit that the committee would want to do. But in principle, this is our draft that we need to adopt. Is there anything that you would want to add at this stage, Member Van Vogel? Is there anything that you would want to add to the draft?
It's an old age home in Kraaifontein, Scottsville, Kraaifontein, that desperately needs a visit.
Scottsville. Oh, okay. Members, you will see on the draft program the 23rd to the 27th of September.
Yes.
Oversight visits, fact-finding missions to old age homes in the Western Cape, including the Southern Cape, the Winelands, and the Metro. That will also impact on the NAISNA visit as well. So I want you to please send those old age homes that you would want to visit. Please send them to the procedural officer so that we can populate those in that period of oversight. Is that in order, Namonde?
Yes, but for Southern Cape, those
Yes.
old age. But also, I would like to get the name for the sports team.
The name of the old age home members?
The Scottsville Old Age Home.
Scottsville. So in principle, members, you're happy that we adopt the program? Agreed to unanimously? You're wonderful. Thank you very much. Any other resolutions or recommendation as per point 4 of the agenda? I do not see any hands. Member Stevens, you happy? Thank you very much. Namonde, anything we left out?
Nothing from my side, Chair.
Honorable members, that concludes our first meeting. Thank you very much and have a most wonderful day. See you soon. Thank you. Thank you. Our meeting is adjourned.